One of the hardest parts of being the sustainability champion in an organization is bringing others along with you, to get the participation of colleagues, managers, and wider stakeholders. They all need to be convinced to adopt the right behaviors and put sustainability into the heart of their decision making. It's difficult. So to tackle this, we are delighted to have with us today Virginia Cinquemani, who is the founder and director of Green Gorilla Consulting. She has 2 decades of working in the sustainability sector under her belt, and supporting and training and guiding others to engage their clients, their senior management and colleagues in sustainability. So perfect for today's webinar. She's also written 2 books on the topic. I will let her tell you more about what she does and take us through the webinar. So thank you very much, Virginia.
Thank you. Thanks, Camilla, for a lovely introduction. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see my presentation. I'm going to introduce myself. Well, you already done that, just to say, what I've been doing so far and why how I got to this point. Today, the next hour is going to be quite a fast-paced workshop, I want to call it, because I would like you to participate as much as you can and want to, obviously, to get involved. But the idea is that these are skills that are lifelong skills, and it's not necessarily true that you are a good communicator born and you can't really change that. I do believe that you can actually develop some better communication skills, because we can all communicate, but in terms of engaging and persuading people and taking them on board, with your initiatives, then we can definitely adopt some techniques and try, every day a new little technique and see how it goes. So without further ado, let's talk about this then. I always start with this quote because I think it's quite telling of what's happening in general, sustainability or not. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that is taking place. We often think we're speaking, but we're not really communicating. Communication is a much more complex situation that I'm going to try and explain today. And again, I'm not trying to tell you things you already know. Hopefully you will come away from this webinar or workshop with some actionable steps to improve that. So that's me when I got full makeup and everything. This is so basically what I've done so far. Like Camilla said, I've been in sustainability for 2 decades now. Over that, I got to say, but I'm a qualified architect. That's how I started. Then I went into sustainable buildings, and then I retrained as a coach, because I really started thinking, actually, I care more about people than I care about buildings. Not that that's not important, but I feel that when you work with people, there's a lot more satisfaction and your ripple effect is bigger. So that's how I became a coach, but a trainer I've been for really 2 decades. And then I got really interested in this element of communication. And then I researched and I wrote this book, The Good Communicator. If you want, that's the QR code if you want to get a copy, or just download the bonuses. There's lots of bonuses there, templates, stuff that you can use in your day-to-day jobs to improve your communication skills. So that's a bit about me. Now, another QR code, but that this time is because I really want to understand your challenges and your barriers when we talk about communication. Now, you can either go to menti.com and use that code that you see on the screen, or you can do it on your mobile phone. It's only a very quick survey, but it allows me to understand what are your key challenges. Oops, I'm gonna, Teams is doing my head in today. So here's your QR code. I'm gonna bring up my side of things so you can see it in a minute. But just take 1 minute to vote on that once you see the slide. Right. Hopefully you can see now my my slide. There you go. So I see, a few people have already entered. You can see that it changes the graph, obviously, depending on how many people have voted. Most people think, or, they feel their audience say they don't have resources to implement sustainability. Most of the time, that's the challenge. And that's something that, in my experience, in my career dealing with sustainability, people or people that talk about sustainability is the biggest issue. Our audience is in deaf to what we're trying to tell them. And when they don't want to do it, they just say, we don't have the money, we don't have the resources. Yeah. So that's a common situation. Some people think they are not great communicators. That could be true right now. But like I said before, there are skills that can be actually learned and refined, and they don't need to take over your life. You can just, adjust maybe something every day. Some people, because again, maybe sustainability is not your main job, feel you don't know about the subject enough to talk about it. Now, that could be true, but I tell you, because I've been in this sector for 20 years, sustainability is in everything. If you look around your room right now, where you are, every single element, doors, windows, floors, mobile phones, whatever you go in front of your computers can be done sustainably and made sustainably or not sustainably. It's impossible to know everything. That's the bottom line. When you don't know something, it's okay. You can just go and ask somebody else, or you can learn that piece of information. So that's just to give a bit of peace of mind. You don't have to know everything in order to promote sustainability. You can just be passionate about it and have exactly the same effect. Okay. And yeah, some people feel their audience don't care, and some people do not care. But how do we make them care? So that's the bottom line of what we're trying to achieve today, is at least raise that awareness of what can we do. We understand it's difficult, we understand it's challenging, but what can we do to change the situation? And by the way, because most of you responded that your audience say they don't have resources to implement it, that's an excuse. You will see, that's an excuse. There are other reasons why they say so. And if I can get that away from me now, there you go. Okay, let's move on. So let me explain why we have these results, because to be honest, that these come again and again. So you're not alone, that's for sure. Often we push our values and our beliefs ahead, okay, because we believe in it, or we think this is part of what everyone should do. This is the right thing to do. That's what we push. However, even in the language that we use sometimes, or the newspapers use sometimes, fighting climate change, tackling biodiversity loss, being an eco warrior, is such an aggressive language. We got enough. I mean, right now, especially in this historical period of real wars, we don't want to create another one. In fact, the planet needs more, if you want a gentle approach, not a war. If it's a war, none of us, I bet, none of us in this room feels like putting their weapons on every morning and fight a war. That takes an enormous amount of courage and time and mindset that, generally speaking, we don't have. So why do we speak that way? It's just aggressive and it's depleting our energy, even the language that we use. And also, when we push, even if it's just our beliefs or our values, it's actually following a law of physics. For every action in nature, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And you must have seen it also. I don't know if you have children or you have, stubborn people around you. If you try and push something, you often get a pushback. Well, if you try and work with them, you might get a completely different result. So my invitation today is really to start shifting that mindset that we have to push sustainability. We must, or we have to fight that war. Enough wars in the world. We need to collaborate. We need to co-create. In fact, that's the word that I prefer to use. And in fact, just to give you another bit of, just something to reflect on, you might have a deep moral compass that guides you. Many people have that, but actually not everyone has that. Not everyone thinks about sustainability or social equality as much as we might do in this room. Therefore, what we need to do, instead of having that as our objective, we need to think about other things that other people might have as objectives, like glory or, being famous, I don't know, fame, money, whatever else, and then use sustainability in a way as a way for them to get there. That could be your clients, it could be, I know that you come from different kind of industries, could be clients, could be customers, could be your top management, could be other people in the organizations where you are. And that's okay. I mean, to an end at this stage is actually good enough. The second sticky point is that we think the facts will change behavior. Now, if you think about it, giving more facts and said, well, but can you see, this is obvious, so much pollution and the temperature today is so unseasonal. We know that it's so hot, at least in the south of England when I am, it's very hot for being just the beginning, actually mid of June. And we know that that's, climate change, but the fact is not changing behaviors. And if it did, we wouldn't have all these climate change reports every year saying that we are in a state of emergency and our house is on fire, etc., etc. Facts per se don't change behaviors. We need to understand what change behaviors then. The third point is that we forget communication is actually a two-way street. Remember the quote at the beginning from George Bernard's show. Effective communication, I want to imagine it as a dance of two or more people. Yes, it is about speaking and telling people what you think or what you want them to do, but most importantly, it's about listening and co-creating those solutions, those results together. I hope I will get you to at least be aware of what you can do beyond just learning more about sustainability, because that's important, but that's not all, right? You got also listening and working together with others. And now my cheesy little dance on the screen for you. If you push jargon, data, numbers, facts, just to impress others or your ethical, like I said, your beliefs, etc., unfortunately, what happens most of the times is that you alienate people. It's like stepping on their toes in that dance. So let's get to see what this good communicator framework that I came up with means. It's actually pretty straightforward if you think about it. The first step is really to try and understand who you got in front of you. What is the situation? And this works better, by the way, not where you have like a one-off conversation, but maybe if you are involved in a big project, like putting together a strategy for your company, a sustainability strategy, or having to work with clients and get them on board of your sustainability initiative. So some sort of longer term thing. Although some of these elements, once you get familiar with them, you can use in one-off conversations as well. So first of all, understand the situation, understand who you got in front of you. That's super important. Is probably, one thing you want to take away from today is, I would say this, try and get to know your audience better. Now, it takes time, but without the little bit of effort at the beginning or prep work, if you like, is very hard. Everything else just doesn't happen. Really understand who you got in front of you, the context, and maybe the opportunities, the risks, all of that around that project or that conversation. Second is really to try and establish the goals, because often people think they have good goals in sustainability, but often it's just what they want and not necessarily what they need. Now, a big, massive example, the UK aim to go for net zero in 2050. Wonderful if we had really all the roadmap to get there. We haven't seen that yet. So is that a meaningful goal? Well, who knows? We will see. But the thing is, we really need to start by understanding the needs versus the wants of who you got in front of you and yourself as well, or your company. Build up that case, persuade people, to go for something better or more, or for what really they need and the planet needs and you need, okay? Then there is the step of co-creation, which is the one that I get most excited about because nobody talks about this. It's not just about collaborating. It's not just about me versus you. Like we said before, we are in it together, you guys. When you deliver a project with somebody, or you are in a company where you got, again, customers or clients or your top management, you need to find what you need to do together. And then everybody has agency, because I know it is. And this is maybe why you're here today, because you might be feeling isolated, like you're the only one who cares or the only one who actually takes that responsibility on. But actually, your only responsibility here is to engage others and get them to help you to reach those goals together. And we will see a couple of techniques to do that. And then, of course, there will be barriers. It's not plain sailing, it never is. But also understanding where the barriers are will help you bust them more easily. Finally, we really want people to get that commitment. We want people to carry on with the actions and the plans and the things they've planned to do. So let's see how we can do that. So that's the 5 steps. However, there is one step, which is for me step 0. Again, a very, very important step is the mindsets. Sorry, I can't talk. Let me drink some water. Mindset shift. That's what I wanted to say. Like you said before, if we keep on pushing, we get pushed back. If we keep on thinking that just by talking or presenting data and facts, we're going to change things, again, we need to change that mindset. So let me introduce you to your beautiful brain, which I'm sure you all know how it's made, more or less. You've seen pictures on books. Now, this is one of my crazy illustrations where there is the inner part of your brain that is the most instinctive and really the prime part of your brain, the one that started with your ancestors, which is the lizard brain or reptile, is the one that goes for fight or flight or freeze in case you feel threatened. Yeah, is the one that goes straight without thinking into action. Then you got the mammal brain in the middle, which is the one that developed emotion. Again, quite primordial. Is your emotions coming up when you can't, when you feel like you can't control them, really. And then the most, the newest part, the neocortex, is the one around or, the front. And that's the human brain. Yeah, that's the logical part. Now, depending on the sort of person you are, you might be using more, or the situation, not that we're saying, oh, you are the, I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody. But some people just say, oh, we must act fast. And that's their reptile brain, let's call it, that talks. Or maybe we're more like in touch with our emotions, we're emotionally intelligent, and really, really feel for the planet or for animals or for, for people around us. And we use phrases like, isn't it obvious the planet is dying? And then there are other people that are a bit more rational, more logical, and they talk about net zero by the end of the decade by implementing rigorous carbon accounting, etc. By the way, not criticizing this because we need that. And of course, IIE helps you with that. So that's really important. But if we just go with one or the other, chances are, and without, of course, knowing who we got in front of us very well, chances are that we come across as hasty or emotional or overly emotional or dry. Okay, so it's very important to understand the audience because then you can calibrate a little bit and shift a little bit and understand a little bit more about how to speak to them, not necessarily what comes up first. Now, the easiest part is to stop and breathe. And I'm sure you've been told this by maybe your parents when you were little, when you were like anxious, or your teachers, etc., or people at work even, or your coach. 2 sharp exhales and 1 extra long, 2 sharp inhales and 1 extra long exhale actually has the power to immediately regulate the nervous system. And I know it's not the solution, but it's one solution when you are, for example, in a difficult meeting and people are really obnoxious and they are saying no to everything you say. Take a breath. That's the first step. Okay, take a breath, regulate your nervous system, and see what can you change in your communication. Are you being too overly emotional? Are you being too hasty? Have you been perhaps too dry in the way you're communicating? The other thing is, and I see this especially with people that work in sustainability day in, day out, we forget that we are people. We really do, because we're so focused on the mission sometimes that we forget that we need the basics like everybody else. But that's also if you are a parent, if you got caring responsibilities, if you are, animals, or, everybody else and everything else comes first. Now, I'm not trying to teach grandma to suck eggs, as they say, but really think about, at least on a regular basis, maybe every week, am I doing all of these things, starting from the basics of good sleep, good food, feeling safe, seeing my friends and family, taking time to go to the gym or taking a good walk, being in touch with nature, think about gratitude or what you got, etc., etc. Can you see it's like in a circle of motion, clockwise motion. Am I actually taking care of myself? Because you cannot possibly push a very hard up the hill boulder if you're not completely replenished. And that, again, it sounds basic, but I've seen in and out again and again with my coaching clients, that's a recurring problem. So that's just to say, okay, mindset shift, start with you, what you think, how you react, how you take care of yourself. The second important part of shifting your mindset is about being empathetic with other people. Even if you don't like what they're saying, even if they are pushing back and saying, oh, no, we haven't got the resources to implement anything. Again, take a breath and think, okay, I got another person in front of you or another gorilla, like in this case. And think about being like an explorer who wants to really, really try and understand where that other person is coming from. That doesn't mean agreeing with them, by the way. It's just mean being curious. It just mean, okay, we are in it together. We're both human. Let's understand what's going on. It's not necessarily they don't have the resources. The priority is somewhere else. Okay, let me understand better. What sort of person is that, etc., etc. It's that curiosity that really leads to better relationships and to better rapport, which is the first step of actually changing minds. Now, how can we use this empathy? Now, like I said a minute ago, acknowledging the other person's feelings and where they come from, or their North Star, the motivation, is not agreeing with them. It's just about establishing a connection, understand where they come from, and be curious. Now, another helpful way I find of addressing this is thinking, okay, it's not the person in front of me that is the problem, it's the issue that we have in between us. Okay, let's focus on the issue. Do they want to reach a certain goal? Do they want to implement, I don't know, a new program? Okay, I want to do it in a sustainable way, for example. Great, let's see the issue. The issue is a program and I want to put sustainability in it. Let's see how we can combine the things. It's not a person. The person is not my enemy. We are in it together. And it's very difficult because sometimes we're so used to personalize everything that it's difficult to detach ourselves a little bit and just focus on the issue at hand. But it's very important because once you understand other people's way of thinking and feeling and really try and be empathetic, we build up trust because we'll listen more, the other person will trust us more, and that's when we can influence them. That's when they will start listening to what we're saying. And that means we're going to reach our goals, but not just our goals, also the other person or audience goals and the planet's goals. So everybody's happy. Okay, so it's very, very important not to skip this step. But how do we do that? So let's think about how we build rapport with anybody. And I know people are pressed for time. I'm not trying to say, oh, you have to spend hours and hours trying to research who you got in front of you. That's not the point. There are certain ways that there is actually, they're quite quick where you can speed up that process of rapport building. But first, let's understand a little more about communication. Now, gorillas obviously are my thing. That's why they come back again and again in my illustrations. But like we said before, speaking, great. We all learned that when we were quite little. Listening, yeah, still struggle. I think everybody struggle a little bit to listen attentively, especially now with these things, mobile phones and the like. We get so distracted, even when other people are talking. We tend to reach out for our mobile phone, which hasn't really helped with the listening part. But there are other things in it, that we don't necessarily consider. Why are we actually talking right now? Who are we talking to? Again, that's the audience, right? How are we talking? Is it email, phone, like in this case, video? Because that changes sometimes the way we behave, we communicate. When are we doing it? Is it maybe late at night when people are already tired, or very early in the morning when many people are cranky? Where are we? Are we in a busy environment? We can't really hear each other. What are we talking about? Is this a necessary important conversation is just, we're just talking about the weather. So all of these elements, and I know we don't necessarily think about it, but my aim today is really to raise your awareness to these things. When you have an important conversation to have with somebody, surely you don't choose busy in the middle of the street situation, you can't really hear each other, or maybe if you're talking about something important, you don't want them to be attached to their phones. Likewise, you don't want to be on your phone. It's all these little things, and they might seem incredibly trivial, but I know for a fact, guys, I got divorced also under my belt. If I did learn these things before, who knows where I would be right now. I think communication is one of the most important things, and sometimes you don't get it quite right. So obviously, there's lots of quotes. So this is attributed to Lincoln, but maybe not. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first hour sharpening the axe. All to say, do spend 10 minutes before your next meeting to prepare and to think about, okay, who do I have in front of me? Is this the right situation? All of this stuff that we said before. But how do you find out about your audience? That's sort of obvious. Very often, especially the first time you meet somebody, either you don't know about them, or you spoke to them on the phone or online, or maybe via email. If it's like an important new client, for example, you might not have any conversations until you meet the first time. Great, but there is LinkedIn. There are websites, there are other social media that you can check out without stalking, by the way. It's just to really try and understand who you got in front of you, what positions they have within a company or in the situation specifically. And that, again, you will see how you can use that to learn more about them and speak to them in a different way. This is a stakeholder management graph, power versus interest. Now, if you've done any management courses, you might have seen something similar before. But in a very, very simple way, when you speak to someone, for the first time especially, you don't need necessarily, or maybe you got bigger audience, you don't need to convince everybody. What you need to do, and that's part of the prep work, is trying to understand who is better for you to influence or engage with, because not everybody will have the same way on the outcome. Okay, there'll be people with a lot of power within an organization, for example, and a lot of interest in what you're trying to do. Brilliant. These are your friends. You have to work with them, and they are your allies to promote your initiatives across the company. For example, is the CEO, the CSO, whatever it is. In other cases, you might have people with a lot of power, they're not very interested, and these are the people that create some problems, because obviously they have the power to stop what you're doing. So what do you do? And that's when you get strategic. You need to engage with your promoters, find the promoters, and then they can talk to the others at the same level. At the same time, you might have people at the grassroots level, people that don't have a lot of power within an organization, but they are interested in what you're doing. And that's great, because you can get also initiatives starting from the bottom up, but you need a bit more mass in that sense. So you see what I mean? Sometimes you need to really map it out, especially if it's an important project, a strategic project, your ESG strategy. Think about you effectively to push your initiative. You can't do it all alone, especially if you're the only sustainability champion in a company. You need more people. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, especially for people that don't have a lot of time and a lot of energy. You can't go around and try to convince everybody. Just be strategic about it. Now, the easiest way to really get to know people, beside obviously looking them up online, etc., is the very first meeting that you have, asking open questions. Now, that helps, and also listen to the answer. I'm going to be a bit more specific about this in a minute. This is really important to understand who you got in front of you, of course, but also to demonstrate that interest, that attention, that empathy. Listening is one of the easiest ways to actually build up that relationship very, very quickly with people. It lowers the barrier to sustainability, but also when you listen, you might find potential problems and risks that if you only talk, you will never find. Okay? Now, open questions. Some people, again, might know what they are, others might not. How, what, why, when, who, where. All of these questions open up the conversation. People cannot answer yes or no to this. So those are the ones that you should really focus on, because you will learn a lot more about the project, about the context, about the people, if you ask why. Actually, why is it a bit controversial? Because you could be quite direct. Why are you doing this? It's not very good. But how come this has happened? Or, okay, what are we doing? What is your objective? What are your main challenges? Okay, who is in charge of this? Etc., etc. So you can learn more about the situation and people. Now, so the point is, what happens, generally speaking, it doesn't matter, don't worry if you don't want to share, but is even if you knew that this was going to happen, your brain was like, oh, that's disappointing, you're not listening anymore. What's the point of talking now? What's the point of, and you lose your train of thought. And that, even if you know what's going to happen. Imagine when you don't know what's going to happen. We all had this experience of people, you're talking, maybe at a networking situation, and people just get, start looking at here or their mobile phone. I hate that. The point is, you guys, step into somebody else's shoes. When you are talking to them, listen attentively. Find a way, if you really must get away, to not to get distracted while they speak. I know it sounds incredibly basic, but hopefully this exercise has shown a little bit that listening is so important to build relationships, because other people feel completely discombobulated. We stop listening and they don't want to share with you anymore. Well, you need to get that to that point where the rapport is solid and they can share with you and you can share with them, and then you can work together. Okay, right. This is always a little bit more challenging when we are online, but hopefully you can see my screen again. So we talked about asking open questions, listening attentively, really trying to build that relationship. Now the goals. This is quite important to tell me, is this a need or a want? The thing you see on the screen. Need or a want? I mean, you might say, my daughter is 15, say, I really need, acrylic nails. Okay, that's right. But generally speaking, something like that is a want. Even if you know that it's a Polestar, it's an electric car. Do we really need a new fancy, flashy electric car? Is this a need or a want?
A need.
It's a need. Okay, so that's in the most basic way. Need, wants. Okay, need something that we absolutely, obviously need to carry on. Other things are wants. Most people are wants. So most things are wants. So they're not needs. Now, when you are in that situation where you're trying to establish a relationship, you need to get with them, maybe, and your goals as well. The first thing is to understand, actually, before I start with my needs or what I want, let me ask them, what's your biggest challenge? And then, what do you want to accomplish? You can see the difference. The biggest challenge would be their need. The biggest want is what they want to accomplish, okay? Let's see, for example, when you are in a situation, say, I know there's several vets or veterinary practices and part of the IIE. Maybe your biggest challenge with your veterinary practice is to reduce your carbon emissions, reduce waste, which sometimes is quite a problem. Okay, that's your biggest challenge. Maybe you want also to put solar panels on your roof. That right now might not be your biggest challenge, but something you want, because of course it's going to help, great. But the biggest challenge might be to reduce your waste right now. Okay, you see the difference. It's not that it's a bad thing to want a Polestar or photovoltaic panels. It's maybe not a priority. Okay, so that's the thing. When we start setting goals that are actually responding to a need, they're much more meaningful and they get bigger results. And you have to combine them with your own. So this is for your audience, but also for yourself. What is your biggest challenge? What do you want to accomplish? And understanding the difference is very important, because then we can prioritize what we are actually working on together. Okay. The other questions underneath are other questions you can ask to just to have a bigger, a bigger picture. I'm not going to go into the details, but in the workbook that I shared before, you got them there. So once we have established needs and wants, then you can start changing the way you communicate sustainability, because then you know if the biggest challenge is, for example, waste, then I can sell to that need. So I can say, okay, if we are adopting this program, we're going to address the waste issue, which might be actually that we save a lot of money in the process. Okay, so that's a cost and related cost and operational savings. The other things that might be related to property, for example, if you have issues with the property, with the assets, it could be that a sustainable building actually sells or rents better. Or maybe you might be able to access green funds that otherwise you wouldn't be able to access. It increases productivity within any business, really, to have a sustainable environment. But also something that people forget, you also have risks management or risk management associated with sustainable practices. You can avoid fines. You have more, you do better due diligence. Your brand and your reputation is going to be enhanced. Your license to operate might depend on it, etc., etc. And finally, you might want to push sustainability from the angle of attracting more better customers or attracting talent, or having an advantage over your competitors, or innovate and have a better quality service. Now, you can't just use any of this. That's why you need the prep work, depending on the audience and what they need, and perhaps even what they want. You can sell to that need and to that want. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, you will find this in the workbook for future reference. There is also a bonus exercise on the workbook where you can think about maybe your last conversation and whether your audience needs and wants, you actually got them. But again, go to the workbook, you can do that in your own time. Now, I'm conscious of time. These always take a bit longer than I hope, but let me talk about co-creation. And let's see what that means. When you establish those goals, that's the future blue bubble there, okay? Once you have proper need-related goals, then those are your priorities, right? Of course, things change so rapidly, especially in sustainability, that you might need to adjust over time. But once you have those goals right there, then your job is to work backwards to reach today, the point of starting that project, for example, or that strategy or whatever you want to do. And that's how you basically is called backcasting. So you have the goals. Now they're like proper goals everyone is happy with. Then you go backwards. And that's how you decide on priorities, is the things that will lead you to that specific goals from the end point backwards, if that makes sense. Now, why do we talk about co-creation? Because all this process cannot be done just by the sustainability champion in a company, okay? Everyone needs to be involved. It's a co-creation exercise. Now, when you're making a cake, I always make this example because usually cakes are much nicer, much better tasting than the single ingredients. If you eat flour on its own, it's horrendous, okay? But if flour is combined with a bunch of ingredients and chocolate and organic oranges, etc., it becomes something incredibly luscious. So this is a co-creation, because when we think on our own, we're brilliant and we are intelligent, but we never get to that extra level, that multiplying of singular intelligence and singular thinking and singular, very individual brains coming together. Okay, that is the magic. But also what co-creation does is gives agency to people. It's not just your job, like I said several times, it's everybody's job. And then they have to feel that is also their responsibility, okay? But how do you get there is by really setting up some ground rules if you can, and thinking, okay, maybe you have a meeting coming up. You say, okay, guys, we're going to try and do things slightly differently today. We're all gonna maybe talk in turn. Everybody listens, do not interrupt. But at the end of the round, we're gonna respectfully thinking about how we can enhance our colleagues' ideas. Not necessarily say, no, but we can't do that. No, let's try yes and, which I'm going to go to in a minute, and I'll explain what that technique is. But the thing is, everybody, you need to push people to be involved. Push, not, sorry, wrong word, because we don't want to push, but really entice them and say, listen, you're going to gain so much from this process, but we need to do it together. I can't do it without you. And that's the thing. Once you understand the context of the stakeholder, is much easier. Now, you can't, very rarely we can change people's mind, okay? That's hard. However, if you work together in a process to address the issue with them, it's much, much easier. Often we have some technical expertise, or we know we have more interest perhaps than others, but other people have their own expertise and their own ideas. And if you combine them together, the result is much, much richer. Now, again, on your workbook, you will see this graph, but the idea is, in order to get to that result, and that's also connected to finding better goals, we need to go at the bottom of why we're doing certain things, why are we acting in a certain way? Why do we have certain goals? And by asking why all the time, we get to the bottom of what we really should. Because of hygiene. Okay, and why is that? Can we change that? So is that mental model, can we actually just use single use, or can we use reusable in some cases? Is those underlying structures and patterns and trends that often are automatic. We don't think about stuff, but if we ask why a number of times, why did that happen, why are we getting it, then you get to the real solutions that are actually maybe easier to implement than what you got right now, cheaper, you know, more obviously more sustainable, etc., etc. I hope that makes sense. This is still, you know, in the realm of co-creating solutions that make everybody happy. So I mentioned yes and. Now, if you've ever done comedian improv gigs, you will know that this is actually a very classic technique that comedians use. They never say no. They always say, yes, I like your idea, and we could do this other thing. And that's where you get to these absurd, incredibly creative, innovative ideas. The comedians, so, you know, the sketches are really, really hilarious. In our context of business, we can do it as well in a slightly different way, of course. So we can say, yes, I like your idea. That's why the round robin I was imagining before, you know, in a meeting, everybody shares their ideas. We don't say, no, but we can't do that. No, but is not allowed. We can, again, it could be a ground rule. No, we can say, yes, I like that. And maybe you take that 10%, just the 10% that you're interested in. Yeah, or the thing that really, really works. And we can add to that with something else. Somebody else comes and says, yes, I like that little part, and we could do this other thing. That's how you generate and innovate and really come up with very, very, very creative solutions to the goals or the challenges that we have. Very conscious of time, because this is actually a beautiful exercise, again, to do in rooms. Because I've seen people creating businesses in 2 minutes with this exercise, literally very, very creative businesses in just 2 minutes. But if you try even at home tonight, you know, with whoever you got home with you, and say, okay, let me try and just say yes and to whatever they say. You don't have to share it with them, maybe afterwards. See what happens, because we too often automatically saying no, but when you say yes and, you create a lot better collaboration and even co-creation, if that makes sense. How much time do we have still?
We've got 5 minutes.
Okay, let me go quickly to the barriers, and then I'm going to send this if you want to look at the commitment part, because that's actually quite, relatively small. But barriers is an important one because always we say, oh my goodness, people, like we said at the beginning, they always say they don't have the resources, they don't have the money, etc. Now, it's also part of the way we talk to them, like I tried to explain since the beginning. You realize that when you speak to little children. If your audience is like, I've been doing a lot of volunteering with my local charity to explain sustainability to children like 6-year-olds, it's so hard. That's why I'm using, but it really taught me how to speak to different audiences without using my jargon, my data, the knowledge that I have, and trying really hard to step into somebody else's shoes and their way to communicate or communicating. And if you have children, you might see where I'm coming from. Now, the point here, the key point I would like to drive here is, if you think about it, people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill. They want a 1/4-inch hole. So what you need when you communicate to others, you need to really think, okay, I know their goal now, I know their challenge. We need to sell to that challenge or speak to that challenge if you want to use the sell word. So for example, energy efficiency, okay? Often, especially if you work in this sector, we talk about the technologies, we talk about energy scope 1, 2, and 3. Again, important things, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, net zero, etc. However, people, our customers, people in the street, they care about saving money. They care about cozier homes. They care about more comfort. When I speak to those children, they care about the polar bears more than the adults do. So if you talk about animals and polar bears, they're going to listen better to you. So that's the point. It's changing slightly and thinking, okay, what do they understand of what I'm saying? Or what do they really care about that I can actually talk to them? The sustainability is going to help with. So can anyone here in the audience want to pretend I'm a child, I'm a 5-year-old child, and I don't know what sustainability is? Can you explain it to me? I know we've got just a couple of minutes. Somebody brave. You can unmute yourself. Camilla, I'm going to invite you if nobody wants.
Yeah. So I would talk about I would talk about protecting the animals and the plants and other people, as well as, making business happen.
But what does sustainability means? Why this big word? What does it mean?
Oh, I don't think I can unlock that for you in,
I know,
in
right?
2 minutes that we have left.
I know, right?
But yes, it's difficult,
so
isn't it? We get straight into jargon and talking in our sort of slightly in our echo chambers. So it's
exactly.
And you want to be able to speak in somebody else's language. I get the point.
You use the language that you learned, not necessarily the language of the person in front of you. And this is an example. Most people don't have to deal, every day with their child. But it's really, and this is helpful, again, you'll find in the workbook, is thinking about some people are actually more direct. They want to talk about the results and the task at hand and, obtaining, I don't know, money, whatever. Other people be more influential. They want to talk about the vision or awards, perhaps, what's with IAE, by the way? So that sort of thing is important for more people and less to others. Or maybe people want to talk about the planet and the animals, etc. In that case, there might be that steady, more, sort of caring personality. Other people are more like, the engineering type, if you like. They talk about the data. They talk about that scope 1 to 3 energy data. So once you understand a little bit to where your audience sits, it's much easier to talk directly to them in the language that they understand and they can listen to. You wouldn't talk to a CEO the same way you would talk to your neighbor, the same way you would talk to an engineer. Sometimes it's obvious, and but sometimes you have to think about it. It's like, oh, okay, hold on, maybe that word that I'm using is not quite understandable. And I'm going to stop there just because, actually, I just want to say that because that's the starting sort of full circle. When people say it costs too much, they don't have the resources. Again, it pays off to really try and understand where they come from. Maybe they feel silly because they don't understand what you're saying. Maybe they think things are going to change, they're going to lose their customers. or maybe they don't have, it's complicated, in which case you can sit down with them and explain. Maybe they can't be bothered. Okay, how can you make them bothered about it? Again, depending on what they care about. Maybe they don't understand. They're not going to tell you, maybe, if they're adults. Especially, what's in it for me? What do they gain out of all of this? What do they gain out of a new ESG strategy? Some people don't have time. Okay, how can you help them to have time? Can you support them? Can you give them, I don't know, templates, support, man hours, whatever it is? Some people are just not interested, and they're like the stream that you might want to leave alone, if you remember that stakeholder matrix. I hope that makes sense. And I know it's quite a very quick whistle through, but really the best way is ask those open questions, offer to help, and see what happens. I'm going to stop sharing because there was another part that I run out of time to say and to cover, but I will send it through, and hopefully it's quite self-explanatory. Any questions?
Hello, yes, I have a question, and I'm going to not quite quote somebody because I can't remember what they said. But a certain political leader recently suggested that we can't do net zero because our quality of life, or something along the lines of our quality of life, would be reduced. We'd have to, which I assume would translate to, you'd have to give up meat, you'd have to give up cars, you'd have to give up foreign holidays.
Yeah.
That is a barrier. And it's, how do you keep on doing the same thing, possibly, is how you get to them. But I just wondered your thoughts on that sort of concept of people are concerned their quality of life is going to have to diminish in order to achieve something they don't really buy.
Yeah. So that's a common, politicians mainly, way of putting things because they don't want to do it. They don't see enough advantages. Now, you will see that in order for people to switch to something different, not just sustainable, but different, they have to have double the advantages. When you want to switch banks and it takes forever, is because you don't have enough advantages to do that.
Yes.
The thing is, how can you present to somebody that is saying that all the advantages of actually doing it? Yes, it is often presented as giving up something, but what will you gain instead? Or what are you losing out? There is also good, there is a point in actually highlighting the negatives. Is this comfortable for everybody, like this weather, and in August or July when it gets to close to 40? No, people actually suffer. So depending on what they're interested in, you can paint it out. Okay, you're gonna gain a lot, or actually you're gonna lose out. What are you gonna lose out if things keep on going this way? Because this is a delay and a sort of deflecting tactic that is used a lot in politics. But all we can do is to really try and enhance the business case for sustainability, so present more advantages, or talk about the massive disadvantages. Does that answer the question?
Oh yes, it does make sense. It's trying to identify the advantages without saying that the climate will suffer.
Yeah. I mean, if it's politics, there is a massive disconnect. That's for sure. But there is a lot of individual. It's good to focus on the individual actions at this stage. Yeah. Because otherwise it feels too overwhelming. And none of us, I don't think, in this room are actually lobbying the government directly day in, day out. If they do, wonderful, thank you. But the thing is, we can only focus on what we can control. And that's our work environment, our families, our communities.
So thank you very, very much for joining us, Virginia. Very interesting and great interactive session. So that was really great.